Order. Sorry, Prime Minister, I'm sport. You'll begin the express train and it'll be out of here. Made up of order, Prime Minister. I think you need to leave.
The unthinkable has just happened inside the House of Commons. What began as a routine Prime Minister's questions rapidly spiralled into one of the most chaotic, confrontational PMQs sessions in recent memory, leaving Keir Starmer visibly rattled, MPs shouting across the chamber, and the Speaker forced to take drastic action live on air. From the very first exchanges, the atmosphere was electric.
Entirely made up of order, Prime Minister. Mr. Holden, I think you need to. Prime Minister!
The Prime Minister attempted to project calm authority as questions turned toward international security, Greenland, and Britain's global stance. But it quickly became clear that this would not be a smooth afternoon for Keir Starmer. Opposition MPs sensed weakness, and they went straight for it. As Starmer spoke at length about constructive engagement and principles and values, the noise inside the Commons grew louder. Heckling intensified. MPs shouted from both sides. The Speaker repeatedly called for order, but control was already slipping. Then came the Flashpoint. Shadow Transport Secretary Richard Holden pushed the limits of Commons conduct, repeatedly interrupting proceedings, shouting over answers and inflaming tensions. The chamber descended into near bedlam as voices clashed across the floor. MPs waved papers, laughed, shouted and jeered. Starmer struggled to maintain his footing as his answers were drowned out by noise. Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle finally had enough. In a rare and dramatic intervention, Hoyle ordered Richard Holden to leave the chamber, sending shockwaves through Westminster.
Order. Mr. Bowitt and Mr. Cartledge, it is continuous week in, week out, and there's a couple over here who will also be going out for a cup of tea with you. Please, calm it down, or you know the consequence. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they shout on a Wednesday and they defect on a Thursday. The loudest shouter used to be the former Shadow Justice. We should take a note of who's shouting most loudly this week.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to talk about defections. Let me tell him that when I had someone undermining my party, I sacked him. If he sacked... If he sacked...
Gasps rippled across the benches. An MP being thrown out during PMQs is no small moment. It is a public rebuke, a symbol that order has completely broken down.
We're going to get through this Prime Minister's questions. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition and I want to hear the Prime Minister. Those who don't may leave the chamber. Come in.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that if he sacked everyone undermining his party, his front bench would be empty. But these questions I'm asking, jokes aside, these questions are about our national interest. These questions are about our national interest. We support our armed forces in every possible way. Later today, my party will vote to protect our veterans from unfair prosecution. He is ordering his MPs to vote against them. In our national interest, and for the sake of all the brave people in the armed forces, past, present and future, will the Prime Minister do the right thing and vote in support of our veterans, not against them?
Mr. Speaker, she's claiming stroke. She read the guy's defection letter and then at that point decided to sack him. What was she going to do? Correct the typos and give it back to him? She should have sacked him when he made disgraceful comments about faces in Birmingham, and she failed to do so. And she smiled, saying it's a good thing she's cleared out, a good thing there's fewer Tory MPs. The rest of the country agrees with her completely in relation to that.
As Holden exited, the chaos only deepened. Keir Starmer seized the moment to attack the opposition, accusing them of opportunism and accusing the Conservative leader of flip-flopping on national security. But rather than calming the House, his words poured fuel on the fire. Shouts of "answer the question" echoed around the chamber. The focus then shifted sharply and dangerously to the Chagos Islands deal, defence spending, and Britain's military readiness. The leader of the opposition pressed Starmer relentlessly, accusing him of weakness, of giving away territory, and of spending £35 billion, while Britain's armed forces face a massive funding shortfall. The Prime Minister attempted to deflect, citing NATO unity and defence reviews, but the damage was already done. MPs were no longer listening politely. They were laughing, shouting, and openly challenging the Prime Minister's authority. At one point, Speaker Hoyle issued a stark warning to the House, threatening to eject more MPs if the disorder continued. "Calm it down, or you know the consequences," he warned, his frustration unmistakable. This was no longer just PMQs. It had become a public spectacle of parliamentary breakdown. A Prime Minister under siege, an opposition smelling blood, and a Speaker fighting to keep control of a chamber teetering on the edge of complete disorder. And the most explosive exchanges were still to come. As the chamber struggled to regain order after the Speaker's dramatic intervention, the pressure on Keir Starmer only intensified. What followed was not a reset. It was an escalation. With MPs still shouting from the benches, the leader of the opposition redirected the focus squarely onto national interest, defence spending, and the Chagos Islands deal, an issue that has become increasingly toxic for the Prime Minister. The accusation was blunt and repeated. Starmer was giving away British territory, while Britain's armed forces remained underfunded. The Prime Minister tried to regain control by framing the debate around global security and NATO unity. He spoke of the most dangerous international environment since the Cold War, insisting that his government was delivering the biggest sustained increase in defence spending in decades. But the Commons was unconvinced. The leader of the opposition cut through the rhetoric with a devastating line of attack, £35 billion being paid for the Chagos deal, while military leaders warn of a £28 billion shortfall in defence capability. The contrast landed hard. MPs erupted again. Shouts of disbelief echoed across the chamber. Laughter broke out from the opposition benches. Several MPs could be seen shaking their heads as Starmer spoke, his answers repeatedly interrupted by heckling. Then came the most damaging moment of the session. The opposition accused Starmer not just of poor judgment, but of weakness. Weakness in standing up to international pressure. Weakness in protecting Britain's veterans. Weakness in defending national sovereignty. Starmer responded with visible irritation. He accused the opposition of naked opportunism, claiming they were undermining Britain's position for political gain. He pointed to alleged flip-flopping by his rivals, insisting they had taken 3 different positions in 10 days. But rather than turning the tide, the attack backfired. The chamber grew louder. The Speaker was forced to intervene again, shouting, "Order, order," repeatedly, as MPs ignored his calls for calm. At one point, Hoyle warned that more members would be removed if the disorder continued, an extraordinary statement during PMQs. Then the debate turned sharply toward veterans. The opposition demanded to know why Labour MPs were being instructed to vote against protections for British veterans. This line of questioning cut deep. The Prime Minister attempted to shift blame onto previous governments, claiming earlier legislation had failed and left veterans exposed. But the damage was done. The narrative had been set. A Prime Minister struggling to defend his record, deflecting responsibility, and failing to command the House. Even as Starmer spoke, MPs continued to shout him down. One senior figure was heard mocking his answers. Another openly laughed as the Prime Minister tried to pivot back to leadership credentials. And then came the line that summed up the mood of the Commons. The opposition leader accused Starmer of being too weak to stand up for our national interests. The chamber exploded once more. This wasn't just political theatre, it was a public breakdown of authority. The Prime Minister looked cornered, increasingly defensive, while the Speaker appeared exasperated by the sheer scale of the disorder. By this point, PMQs had become something else entirely. A live, chaotic confrontation exposing deep fractures in Parliament and a Prime Minister under relentless siege. And yet, the most personal and politically dangerous moments were still ahead. By the time the final exchanges began, the House of Commons was no longer merely restless. It was on the brink of complete breakdown. The Speaker's patience had visibly worn thin. As MPs continued shouting across the chamber, Speaker Lindsay Hoyle delivered his strongest warning yet, making it clear that any further disorder would result in immediate removals. His tone alone signalled just how far this PMQs had spiralled out of control. But even that failed to calm the storm. The leader of the opposition returned to the attack with a sharp, focused accusation. Keir Starmer was more concerned with surviving the day than serving the national interest. It was a devastating charge, delivered as MPs on both sides leaned forward, fully aware the session was reaching its climax. The Prime Minister attempted to project strength. He spoke about NATO unity, international diplomacy, and recent calls with allies, insisting he had spent the week protecting Britain's national security. Yet every sentence was met with jeers, laughter, or shouted interruptions. The contrast between Starmer's calm delivery and the chaos around him only reinforced the perception that he no longer controlled the room. Then came the moment that crystallised the entire session. The opposition accused Starmer of serially poor judgment, listing example after example where they claimed he had been wrong, reversed course, or misread the public mood. The attacks weren't just policy-based, they were personal, aimed directly at his credibility as Prime Minister. Starmer snapped back. He accused his opponent of unreliable judgment, mocking past statements and highlighting recent political defections. But instead of landing a blow, his response triggered another wave of shouting. MPs jeered openly, some laughed, others shouted over him entirely. The Speaker stood up again. "Order! I tell you now, I'm having no more!" Hoyle barked, his voice echoing across the chamber. The House finally quieted, not out of respect, but exhaustion. In the closing moments, the opposition delivered their final verdict. They accused Starmer of being weak on defence, weak on veterans, weak on sovereignty, and too weak to stand up for Britain's national interests. It was a brutal summary, and the silence that followed said everything. When Starmer gave his final response, it felt defensive rather than decisive. He insisted he had shown leadership on the world stage, accused the opposition of failing to rise to the moment, and questioned their consistency. But the damage was already done. This PMQs will not be remembered for policy detail or diplomatic nuance. It will be remembered for chaos, heckling, MPs being threatened with removal, and a Prime Minister visibly struggling to impose authority. Political observers were quick to note how rare it is for the Speaker to intervene so repeatedly and so forcefully during PMQs. It was a clear sign that this session had crossed a line. For Keir Starmer, the optics were devastating. A Prime Minister surrounded by noise, facing accusations of weakness from all sides and repeatedly drowned out by MPs in his own parliament. Whether fair or not, the image that lingered was unmistakable. A leader under siege.